Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Ouma, and I'm a domain specialist working in the upgrades and migrations line of business. Today, I'm going to have a very quick demo of how to perform data pump jobs on a database, specifically the autonomous database, using SQL Developer. As we are aware, there are several ways for you to actually perform data pump jobs. You can use a command line on Cloud Shell, on the Oracle client connected to your database instance, and so many other ways out there. In this instance, we are going to look at the graphical interface provided by SQL Developer and how you can easily perform export and import jobs using SQL Developer. So let me just quickly show you my database where I will be performing my export from. And here you can see I already have an autonomous database created on OCI. The name of my database is TST-IMP. It's an ADW, very entry level, very small database, 1 CPU, 1 terabyte minimum. This database has one user called testDB user. So we are going to perform a schema-based export from this database. And in that testDB user, we only have one table called persons with one record. So this is a very, very small, database, mainly meant to just show you how to perform an export using SQL Developer of an autonomous database. So having said that, let's jump into SQL Developer and see how we can initiate our data pump process, okay? So here you see my my SQL Developer has been launched. I'm using SQL Developer 21.2.1. And on my left side here under connections, you can see a host of databases. So what I'm going to do here is to look for the database that I just showed you on OCI, the autonomous database. And you can see that there, it was called TST-IMP. If you want to look at the connection details, how to connect to this database, I'm using the wallet, the cloud wallet to connect to my database, and I'm connecting as admin. And I'm using this service TST-IMP_hi. So I have my wallet in there. When I perform a test, I will see a successful test. Yes, there we are. And I can just quickly connect to that database. Okay, so as that is happening on SQL Developer, what we need to do is we also need to, on the left-hand side, see the DBA pane. It is under this DBA pane where we will find the data pump, export and import wizards. It is under the DBA pane that we can do a lot of DBA tasks like backups, Arman backups. We can do a lot of maintenance, tuning, and things like that. So where do we get the DBA tab? When you don't see it on your SQL Developer pane, you just click on View, and then you select DBA, okay? And under the DBA tab here, you will be able to see the connections that you have with your databases up there. For me, I already have the test import connection here. If you don't, all you need to do is to just click on the plus, the green plus icon, and it will feed off the connections that you already have in your tab up there. And that will actually create your DBA tab for the connections that you will have built. So in this regard, we can see that we already connected to our test IMP DB. If I expand it, you will see that, so this is only possible after connection. I can go ahead and do some queries here if I wanted to, but let me just quickly show you what I intend to do in this exercise. So if you scroll to the bottom, you will see other users. We want to identify the schemas that we will be exporting. Okay, so you just expand other users and you'll be able to see the schemas. And as I mentioned, you see we have a user here called testDB user. And this schema has only one table, which is called persons. If you actually want to see what is contained in this table, I just click on that table and I go to my data page. here, and you'll be able to see that this table has only a simple one row, record in that table. So this is what we'll be exporting using DataPump. So straight away, what we do is we go to our testDB instance, DBA tab here, and then you can see some of the operations that you can perform using DBA. You have your database configuration where you can see data as pertains your, parameter files. You can see your database status. You can perform RMAN backups. You can use, the typical DBA tasks that any DBA would want to execute against an Oracle database. For us, we are interested in DataPump, okay? So you can expand this, or you can straight away right-click on DataPump and select the DataPump export wizard. So you can do the export. You can as well also perform some imports whenever needed. So in this example, we are going to be performing an export. So I select the DataPump export. And the wizard launches straight away to step 2 of 8. Here, basically, what you're looking at is we already have the source, okay, which is our test IMP database. Remember, this is the autonomous database that I showed you running in the cloud, connected to through the wallet. Then, of course, it's going to ask you. So, I mean, if you're conversant with DataPump, whether you run it on the command line, I mean, what you see with SQL Developer will just be a reflection of what you are used to, but in a graphical manner. So here it's basically just asking you, how would you want to perform your export job? Do you want the data at DDL, or do you just want the metadata? So you just pick whatever you want here. So in this regard, we are going to take data and DDL. And then it is very recommended whenever possible to perform schema-based exports and imports. Shortens the time, imports and exports only what is necessary. And, sometimes you may not have the need to export or import an entire database. But of course, yes, the options are there. So depending on what you want to do, you can pick what makes sense to you. So we are not going to pick everything here. We are not going to export the entire database. So I'm just going to select the schema. Remember, I showed you the schema that we were talking about before, test DB user. Okay, so once I've selected the schema, I click on next, and for that database that we are connected to, this wizard will be able to show you all the schemas that are available in that database, okay? So what we need to do is to scroll to the schema that we are, that we want to export. And this is the test DB user that I've mentioned before, and we can actually drag that to the other screen or the other window. You can export multiple schemas all at the same time. Like say, for example, we could also include the schema SH. Okay, so that shows you, or we could import, we could export all schemas, but that beats the purpose. So I will take all these back and then just select my test DB user schema. Once we've done that, I click on next. And so this is where you pick on anything you'd want to exclude. So say, for example, in your export, you'd want to leave a few items behind. Say you're not interested in certain indexes, you're not, so, I could just add a row here and click, and you could see some of the things. So depending on the contents or the objects within your schema, you may be able to filter out what you'd want to be moved in this DataPump job, okay? In this regard, we are going to be moving everything. So I will not select anything here to filter in or out, and I'll just go and click on the next button. Here, it will be looking at what exactly it is that we want to export. So remember, we've already selected a schema. It's now going to ask us, what do you want from that schema? So you can either search, if you know what you're searching for, just click on lookup here, and it will search for the schema in the test IMP database. And you remember I had showed you earlier that we just have one simple table called persons under this schema called test DB user. And that is the only item or the only object that it finds. So this is the table that we are going to be exporting, okay? So you can just select that, and it will be dragged down here. So we are basically saying that this is what we want to be exported. Having done that, we click on next, and you will find the next pane now asking me a couple of things. You can have your threads if you want to parallelize this operation. And then, of course, your traditional data pump directory, which basically shows where your dump file, your log files, your export-import related collateral will be stored. Okay, so this, depending on your settings, could either be some object storage, or it could be a file within your, your server where your database is running. But of course, we will have created a directory for us to store our logs and DMP files. If you want to perform a read consistent export, which is normally recommended, you can also pick that here, and you just click, and then you can pick whether you want to do your export consistency by system change number or by a specific date. Okay, our export log is going to be called expdat.log. I'm sure you're conversant with this. This is exactly the same thing that you'd get whether you're performing these using the CLI or any other traditional data pump utility. Okay, then I click on next, and of course it's going to ask me where my data pump, my dump files are going to be stored. We already have the data pump directory here. You can change this if you want to. And then of course we have the %u, should we have a scenario where we have several data pump files being created for our export job. So you will see exp.1, .2, .3, .4, and so on. Okay. You can also even dictate the size of the dump files, each dump file. Then, of course, there are these things that you're used to once the export has been done, or do you want to delete existing dump files, just so that you save space where you are storing these dump files, just in case there is no space. You can append the timestamp to help you identify your dumps even better. You can compress, you can encrypt. So all this is virtually the same thing that you'd have done if you're using any other traditional data pump utility. Okay, then you click on next, and it will assign a job, a name to this job. You can put in a description, my test, whatever, my first export using SQL Developer. And the important thing here there for you to note is that we can also schedule this job, so you don't have to start it immediately. So if you wanted to start it, say, at a later time, maybe you are off the office and you know that the database will be consistent at that time, and you want to schedule this, then you can go ahead and perform your scheduling tasks. And this is also repeatable. So you can define that this data pump job, export job is run like monthly, yearly, daily, or whatever interval that you would actually want. And then, of course, there's this limiter. How often would you want this to run, and when does it stop? Okay, so in this instance, we are not going to schedule this for later. We are just going to ask that this export job is run immediately. Okay, once that is done, you get a summary of what you've done so far in this wizard, and you just need to make sure that everything is correct. Of course, this is our test database, import database, the one that I showed you on OCI. That is going to be our source. And then we are going to be doing a schema-based export of our data. So remember I mentioned we had the TST-DB user schema. And then, of course, you will see a lot of the options that we have here. So this is just a summary of what we've picked in the wizard since we started off. So you see where your log files will go. You see where your output files, which is the DM file, where it will go, and a host of other parameters. The important thing for you to note here again is that we also have the PL/SQL command version of what we've just selected in our wizard, which is reusable. So if you need to, then this is what you can also copy and paste, and these commands can be repeatable elsewhere should you want to perform the same operation. Again, you can also edit any of these parameters should you need to. So that's basically it with the export wizard. Answering all those queries, we've already defined what it is we want to do. Okay, and then that basically just starts the process. So you just click on finish, and there we go. Okay, and you will see that this is running in the background. So the data pump job executed, and we can see that it has been successfully completed, as you can see down here. And you notice that in this pane, we are looking at the log files. If you want to look at the log files in details, as you're normally used to, just to confirm that your export happened correctly, then again, you just go to your data pump here folder, and then you expand this, and you will be able to see where your export jobs are and your import jobs are. And what you do is here we will pick our job, what we just executed. I think we have this job here. Okay. And when that opens, you can see that the job actually ended. It was running, it's no longer running. So everything has been executed, it's successful. And below here, you will be able to now see your log file. I'm sure you are used to this. This is exactly what you would see in a typical log file if you are to cut it on CLI. Okay, so you just see, of course, the master tables were created. You look at when this backup was, the export was done, and you can see the traditional, export details that you'd normally see elsewhere. So you will see a lot of things have been processed, but of special note is you see this. This is what we were exporting. So there is this user called testdb user.persons. It gives you the size. And then down below here, you will see that this data was actually exported, okay? So the user was exported, the table persons under the testdb user was exported. And just as I mentioned, we have one row exported, okay? And this is where you have your logs, and that is where you have your dump file. So you can see the DMP dump file. And remember, it was named exp data %u, and this is what you get with your %u. So you get your date, you get your data pump size file number. In this case, it's very small, so it's just 1, and so you get 01, and there's no additional dump file. Of course, one thing you need to look at before you actually sure that everything completed successfully, you need to make sure that you have this message successfully completed, which basically shows you that this database actually completed, database export completed successfully. And that's it. Very, very simple, nothing complicated, command line based. Another way for you to export your database, whether autonomous database or non-autonomous database, whether on the cloud or on-premise, the process remains the same. I hope this was helpful and you enjoyed the demo. Thank you very much.